grew up with that old school standard. I would say before what even a baby boomer is now.
Yeah.
You know, he grew up with that sort of that old school standard of, do a certain task for a
Hmm.
long time with the same company. Um, you know, and but that's not the
Well,
case anymore.
that's the old school
That
mentality.
is old school mentality, yeah. And so, for instance, when I worked for Alaska Airlines, the first time around, I told you I worked there 10 years and I've
Hmm.
climbed the ladder. So my dad was like, don't leave it. Don't leave it. It's a great company
Yeah.
because it's a good name and,
You got a
it'll last a
job.
while. Good job.
Yeah.
So, and I told you this year would be 30 years if I had stayed there.
Wow.
And sure enough, I probably would be at some kind of executive level. But, you know, from the, if I look at it from the regular scale of life, did it change things? Absolutely. Did it make me? I would say if I stayed in Alaska, for instance,
Hmm.
does it make me the person that I am now? As far as like, and this is like I get a little like embellished about myself, but like spiritually,
Hmm.
mentally,
Yeah.
maybe even financially. You know what I mean? Like, are those things? Do those things happen? And maybe some of those things do happen because I was in a steady place, expecting steady income, and because of Alaska,
Hmm.
before I left Alaska, I had 2 properties already.
Yeah.
So I was already on
How'd
my
you get
way.
those 2 properties?
I would say it.
How'd you get the 2 properties?
So my very first property I bought when I was 22 years old, out of as a necessity thing, because I'm good at math, right?
Hmm.
So this is exactly a good example of math. I went to Alaska Airlines,
Hmm.
moved around in this program they called MDP, Management Development Program.
Okay.
And
So
what
it's
they
like a fresh out of college kind of
yes,
program.
actually, exactly what it was. It was mostly for people, apprenticeship program
Yeah.
out of it was a leadership program out of college. And what they were trying to do is saying we want future leaders of Alaska
Hmm.
Airlines, and what they want to do is put you in positions of what they call supervisory roles,
Yeah.
right? Supervisor like level roles around the system,
Uh-huh.
but you didn't have a choice of where you went. It was basically like apprentice.
So they just like
Kind of like
shipped you
Donald
off
Trump
to...
had apprentice, yeah.
Yeah.
And so what you did is you put your choices down. So
Uh-huh.
when you get hired,
Mhm.
which is again, and also like for instance, the first batch was a class of I want to say 4 people, and 400 people applied,
Wow.
and only 4 people got selected. The
And
second
you
batch,
were one of them.
I wasn't one of them.
Okay.
I was that was first batch. The second batch of people I applied with the second batch. There was over 800 people that applied. Only 8 people or 6 people got hired,
Wow.
right? And I wasn't part of the second batch. Third batch I was part of. There was 8 of us, and same thing. There was over 1,000 applicants. Like it was crazy. And we're talking about exterior applicants too and things like that because this was a program that even if you were out of college, because I don't know if you remember, but in the airlines back in the 80s, especially in like kind of early 90s, you had to have some kind of background to do airline work. Like
So how do people get the background work?
so you go to like a travel agency, you go to travel agency school. Back in the 80s and 70s, before the like 90s broke, before I started, that you had to have airline school background to work for the airline. Unless you worked on the ramp, for instance, which is very like, but it's who you know,
Mhm.
right? On the ramp, it would be the grunts throwing the bags, which
Yeah,
is where I
yeah.
started from. But
I like how you said throwing the bags.
well, we did. We fucking threw the bags. Anyways, I mean, not always, but most times. We slid them. Anyways, so when I worked for Alaska, there was no training school required, but they were really Alaska Airlines. Well, I worked for Horizon Airlines, which is their sister company, but Alaska and Horizon had a very rigid hiring program. They're very big on like if you had airline background, they hired you more instantaneously than if you didn't, right? So you had a leg up if you had any kind of airline knowledge background. So,
So why wouldn't they just teach that? Because they assume
they do now.
They assume that people just
Yep.
somehow come out of high school and they know airline.
Well, no, they go to airline schools
Or
because
airline school. Oh,
back then
okay.
they used to have Doug Fox schooling.
Oh, okay. So like specific
American
schools.
Express Travel, if you ever heard of them.
Mm.
American Express, the card,
The card.
but
Yeah,
American Express Travel, they used to have a travel department, and I think they still do.
They still do.
Yeah, American Express Travel was a big name company, and if you wanted to join like an airline in the future, and actually at the time, this again, we're talking the '80s, and I'm not like super old, but I remember the '80s
Yeah.
enough to know that '80s, like if you were a travel agent in the '80s, you made a lot of commissions,
Mm.
and the more airline reservations and train reservations, you got commissions. Right? So travel agents were big in the 80s. So a lot of them focused on being travel agents, but some of them trickled into the airline business.
Mhm.
Especially if you want to be a ticket agent. See, one of the main reasons they had to have ticket knowledge is, are you familiar with like coding, like hexadecimal code?
No.
Okay, so the old airline businesses in the 70s and 80s, they got their reservations and airline systems from like the old military, right? So American Airlines actually borrowed, Americans has a big system called Sabre. And Sabre is an old hexadecimal Army reservations code. Like every Army would use it for their reservations. and so they took it over. So hexadecimal code is like alphanumeric. So it'd say 1 would mean availability, 2 would mean you're checking the schedule, 3 mean you're checking your booking, right? So it'd be like 1 SEA, which would be Seattle, San Diego, the date, and it would be a pound to say return, or an extra, like let's say an ampersand, including Cabo. So it would be that kind of code. So it's code.
Yeah.
Like how computer software engineers now use code.
Right.
But it's called hexadecimal code, which is basically alphanumeric code. And so the airlines would use alphanumeric code and to use their requests for the system. So if you were requesting a schedule for Seattle to LA on January 10th next year, right, you would put in a certain code. And so you had to know that code. So the airlines didn't feel like, at the time, they were very pretentious. They were like, fuck you, we don't want to teach you.
Yeah.
You know? And so they're like, you learn it yourself, or come in with knowledge about it.
Yeah.
And so there was different systems. There's Sabre, there's Amadeus, there's Apollo. And I actually know a lot of those systems because I learned it by picking it up because I love math.
It's almost like a second language.
Yeah, because I love math. So I probably would have been a really good engineer, like a software engineer. And maybe still could be because I do, I can put, when it comes to math, for whatever reason, I can just put it together easier, you know?
Yeah.
I'm not like some kind of idiot savant where like a good friend of mine who was also one of my groomsmen that Chris talked about the other day, he can do 3,482,000 times 10,485,000, and he'll give you the calculation.
Wow.
Like he's that guy. I'm not that guy. But that being said, that's how the airline business started. My dad sent my older brother and older sister to airline school, travel agent school. They actually both got hired on, I think, with Duck Fox Travel to do temporary work. And my dad was hoping to get airline work, right? Because my dad used to work for the airline.
Okay, which one?
Air Pacific and Fiji Airline in Fiji.
Okay.
So my dad, before we left to LA, migrated from Fiji. My dad worked for Air Pacific, and he was a supervisor there in their catering division. So my dad, I don't know if you remember back in the 70s, Air Pacific, back in the 70s, Air Pacific,
it's a Boeing 747.
It is a 747.
Yeah.
So my dad, we're from Fiji Islands, so Suva is the capital, and Nandi is the main hub. But they'd have a commuter that goes from Suva to Nandi. Sorry, not Suva, but it's called Nassori Airport, but they call it Suva.
Yeah.
It's like 30 minutes out, right? Nassori is the airport. So my dad would work there and sometimes feed into the main Nandi, and if he had big orders or big things to oversee, they want to make sure the chop suey is perfect. They want to make sure, and they were cooking back then. We're talking flash cooking back in the actual kitchen, and then they would. And this is also back in the 70s. They had, I don't know if you remember, the 747 actually had lounges. And you remember that? Did you ever see old pictures of the lounges back in the day?
Yeah, I've seen the pictures.
I don't know if you can pull it up or not, but they used to have in the 747. Look at the 70s and the 1970s aircraft lounges. And if you look at 1970s aircraft lounges, the aircraft actually had a little lounge built in. You would smoke in there.
So why they take it out?
Because money.
Money.
Because my dad, I remember when I was a kid.
They care about
that's a good example right there.
That's a full-fledged.
It's a freaking lounge, right? What's funny is the lounge that I remember is that one right there, the one that's sunken in, says the Glamorous Airline Lounge. See the one where it's sunken in?
I mean, they still make money.
Yeah. It's like the roundy one where it's like this. That one right there. That's the one I remember. I remember being a kid, going on a flight with my dad, being little. But I remember this lounge because
we need to bring this back to travel.
Yeah, and so I remember businessmen and people being there smoking and stuff, and they were looking at us because we were kids. And back then, kids weren't really allowed. But my dad knew everybody in the airline. So he would, I think that the captain or whoever it was, or the flight attendant that he knew. But I remember being vaguely as a kid getting a quick little tour of this particular lounge.
Yeah.
And I was blown away. I was like, wow. And they don't have that anymore at all. Now Emirates has one. And
you're packed like sardine.
Yeah, but they used to have a real straight up lounge where you go in and just hang out. If you go, have you guys ever taken trains before? You've taken a train?
Yeah.
So in trains they have a train, lounge car,
a
dining car. That's basically what airlines had for a little bit. They had a lounge area, and you would go there, have drinks, talk to people, integrate whatever business. They have great food, of course. My dad cooked real food.
Yeah,
so
the food looks great in
that
picture.
So they were cooking real food back then, and I mean it was a whole other adventure. This is. I don't know if you know anything about the airline business, but this is all before what they call deregulation.
Yeah, look at
See that picture there? I guarantee that's before deregulation.
Wow.
And you know what deregulation was? So they basically realized that airlines can call any fare they wanted, And in the 70s, if you remember, even back in the 80s, airline travel was expensive,
Really? Like
right?
how much for a ticket?
Well, so it would go from Seattle to, I think Seattle to like New York in the 1970s would be something like equivalent of what would be like $2,000 now, I
Wow.
bet.
Wow.
But I bet you it was like 400 then, if I had to guess,
But you had those services.
Yes, but you had full service, you had everything. But back then it was really airline travel was very much the like top tier,
Hmm.
upper crest people. And airlines love that because they get to set the prices and people were paying them.
Hmm.
Well, deregulation came and the government said, "Okay, no, you can't just set every price. Like someone's got to regulate these prices.
Yeah.
You got to let the average Joe, if you will, travel because you've got to be able to make a certain amount of money." And yeah, like he says, airline in
Hmm.
1970 prohibits the state from regulating the price and the routes. That was a
Uh-huh.
big thing too because it's a lot of airlines like Northwest Airlines. Remember Pan Am? They
Yeah.
they would they would they would calculate their routes based on how much money they can make. So, for instance, from here to, for instance, not maybe Dubai then, but here to London
Uh-huh.
would be a very good route, right? So, someone like Pan Am would say, "We're taking all the routes." You
Uh-huh.
know what I mean? And then no one would say anything, and we're
Yeah.
charging $1,200 per person per coach, and then $5,000 in first class,
For first
and
class.
no one else could take that route but them.
Right.
And this is I'm shrinking or I'm truncating it basically, but that's kind of what it
And
was.
oddly enough, Pan Am's no longer around.
Depends. It's a lot of airlines. Pan Am, Continental was bought up. I just saw something. PSA is
So
gone.
you could have been an executive at a
Yeah,
airline company.
absolutely.
So what made you get out of that?
In the end, for me with the airline, I really loved it. The people were great. It was just a corporation, though.
Yeah.
In the end, and I don't mean to sound that in a negative way. It's just when you think about corporations, what are they?
It's an entity.
Entity, right? And when
Yeah.
for instance, I was just looking at this up right now, an LLC today, which is a limited liability corporation,
Yeah.
essentially, right? And so I was looking it up because the entity was this LLC, but there's names below it, right?
Uh-huh.
So those are the people that own that LLC. So that's exactly what corporation is, right?
Yeah.
There are owners of this corporation, and it may be in this case board of directors.
Hmm.
In I think most airlines case, like the one I was working for, Alaska Airlines, they have stockholders too.
Yeah.
And so you have lots of people they have to answer to. So when you are in a corporation, you're not always an individual.
Hmm.
And for instance, as a realtor, I am the sole proprietor of my business, right?
Yeah.
I get paid in what they call 1099,
Hmm.
so self-employment. So in the corporations, there's no it's not self-employment, it's corporate employment.
Yeah.
Sorry, W-2. So the way to look at it for me is you technically are a number because they have to make sure that they have every part of this wheel going or of this machine going.
Hmm.
And in corporations, to me, you have this machine over here that's reservations. You have this as operations. You have this as the support staff.
Hmm.
So all those things got to keep running,
Yeah.
whether it's Tony, Ameet, or John Smith.
Right.
And so what sucks about that is you get to know the people. You've been there for a long time. And then all of a sudden, the guy that you loved over here, John Smith, for 10 years, he's either retiring or decided to leave or is no longer with the company anymore for whatever reason, right?
Or
he
his
got
job
fired.
gets phased out.
Exactly. Or his job gets phased out. Now you just built this relationship and time with somebody and they could be gone. And so I think that was kind of my realization with the airline for me, which was, I've given a good run. I wasn't sure if I wanted to be part of a corporation. Um, and so I just looked at other options, kind of what else was out there, and I don't know if you remember again kind of the history of the airline, but in 9/11, post 9/11, of course, everything was kind of crazy.
Mm.
That's when a lot of things happened with the airlines, but the gas prices went up. If you remember?
Yeah.
So I was in Horizon Airline 1994, Alaska, and then 1995. So I had been there 10 years at the '04 mark, and in end of '04, they were like, "Hey, in order to make us profitable, we got to reduce some staff."
Hmm.
And they had already done their share of like essentially downsizing or layoffs, if you will, from the labor ranks.
Yeah.
Now they had to go to the management ranks. So they put out a letter out. They said, if you're in management, we're looking for 151 volunteers.
Hmm.
It was kind of like our own version of Hunger Games, except we didn't have to battle.
So volunteers first, then it's just
and then it's the golden handshake after.
Yeah.
If you were part of that golden handshake. So are you familiar with the golden handshake? Yeah. So that's you're not going to work out here. Get going. Luckily that wasn't me and a lot of people I knew, but it gave me an opportunity. I think at the time the airline was doing it to get people that are 55, 60 out the
Hmm.
door, saying, "Hey, you're close to retirement. You've been here X number of years.
Yeah.
This is what we pay you." And the minimum, I believe, was 10 years that you had to be employed.
Uh-huh.
And when I did the math for me, for instance, it was $38,000 gross to leave. You know,
Hmm.
and I'm like, man, this is very interesting. What's interesting about that for me that week is, um, uh, at the time I was a manager at Alaska Airlines. I managed the reservation control system. It was an internal help desk for the reservation and
Hmm.
ticketing system. So we had 32 employees, we had two management supervisors, and we supported pretty much all the departments, but I'd say 10 major
Uh-huh.
departments in the airline, all funneled through this
Wow.
department to some degree. So I was a lot of politicking, if you will,
Yeah.
for me too, or learning diplomacy because I had to deal with this person to that person to this person
Yeah.
to that person, and lots of meetings, lots of things. And after a while, like I said, I was attending so many meetings and doing so many things. I felt like I wasn't being the Ameet that I wanted to be, you
Uh-huh.
know? So that week I said, you know what, I'm gonna move around to other operations, but I didn't have a degree yet. So luckily I was in a position where my experience spoke for itself, so I became a manager.
Hmm.
But Alaska Airlines was very big on making sure you needed as a minimum requirement a 4-year degree to be a manager.
And you never wanted to finish that up
Well, I
in
never did.
college.
And
Okay.
so what's funny is during that time when I was sort of thinking about what to do next for my career, I'd been there now 4 years as a manager. I said, you know what? Let me get into school and let me go get my degree because I think I only had like 17 credits, like
Yeah.
nothing crazy. I don't think I even 1 year out of the way. I went to UW first, and I was the only person probably ever in history that went to UW and then transferred to a 2-year college.
Yeah.
Even the lady at the admissions, she's like, "You're transferring out?"
Yeah.
She goes, "Usually we have people transfer in." And I'm like, I didn't want to, I didn't want my parent put my parents in a position of financial aid or to help. They didn't have the ability, and I didn't have, I didn't want to do financial aid.
Yeah.
I've heard, and you probably know this already from your own history or people but financial aid just seems to be a trap to me, And I think and I was very
It's
calculated then,
yeah. Student loans are the only loans that
right?
you'll never get rid of.
Well, and that's the thing. As a realtor, I see that more and more. So I'm kind of glad that I didn't go that route, but it's also took me away from wanting to go to get my degree because I told myself when I was younger, if I didn't get a scholarship, then I would pay for my own schooling.
Yeah.
And the only way that happened was I just got a job at Horizon Air throwing bags,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I don't want to leave the airline business, but I want to still go to school. So I was going to UW. I even had a bike to go between
Yeah.
classes. So I went to UW. I went from UW to Highline Community College,
Uh-huh.
and but colleges didn't suit me, especially because I was working full time. So after about 17 credits, I said, I'm out, and then
Yeah.
I went back here and there. So fast forward till 2004, I'm like, I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna go back to Highline. I went and get my transcript. I figured it out, and I'm like, holy crap, what am I gonna do?
Yeah.
Um, so I looked around at options, and then my now ex-wife, fortunately or unfortunately, we're still really good friends. She gave me the best advice. She's like, I said, I don't know what to take. I just went to the campus and I feel old. I'm 27,
Yeah.
27. I think I was 27, 28. So 10 years older than most of
Yeah.
these people here. And she goes, you know what? Just take something you would like. Didn't you take like ceramics back in the day or photography?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that's true. She goes, for the first class, don't even worry about it being something that applies to your credit. Once you just get acclimated to school, she said. And I said, you know what? That's a great idea. So I went through. At the time, I had 2 properties,
Uh-huh.
and I remember thinking about getting a third property. Um, and I think maybe I already had three. But anyways, whatever the case is, I knew that I liked real estate. My dad was always buying and selling.
Hmm.
So I said, hey, why don't I get my real estate license? I see this class on here that said real estate license class. And I said, okay, great. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and get my real estate. It says at the end of this, you'll be qualified with the hours to take your real estate exam.
Oh, nice.
And I'm like, oh, cool. I didn't know they even offered that. And actually, Highline doesn't offer that anymore.
Ah.
So I went through. It was a great opportunity. And you know how the universe, I now believe the universe does things on purpose, and we just got to find that purpose of why things are
And
happening.
pay attention to
Pay attention, right?
to the
Like
signs and
when you're wishing for things, whether it's time then you're down in your luck,
Mhm.
or when you're wishing for things and things are great, you have to understand that when you wish for $1 million, $1 million isn't just going to appear. It's gonna be an idea or something that comes to you from some location you never thought about.
that can
That'll
generate.
that'll exactly that could generate the $1 million you want. Or if you want peace, love, and happiness, it may not be that. It may be a dog at the
Yeah.
door, and you're like, whose dog is this? And you're
Yeah.
adopting now. You get what I'm
And
saying?
you'll
Like,
still be waiting for peace, love, and happiness.
and you're still over here
when
waiting.
it's right in front of you.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
mean, there's an old story about the guy on the boat. He asked
Yeah,
God
yeah.
something. You ever heard that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, won't get into that one. But the thing is, when you wish for something, the answers do come out. So I was wishing to go into something else. I knew that at the time I had already applied for a couple positions. They frankly said, they're like, hey, you don't have your degree.
Yeah.
Like, we really want to see that. We see that you have operational knowledge. We see this. So I'm like, okay, and I thought that I'd someday be an executive,
Hmm.
maybe even the CEO of Alaska Airlines or some airline. And so I said, this is necessary anyways to get to the master's level,
Yeah.
right? So um, I applied for. I got on Monday. I went to Highline and signed up for the classes that would start, I think, in 2 weeks,
Hmm.
and or maybe 3 weeks. And then on Friday, the letter came out saying, "Hey, we need volunteers." On Thursday, the director, or now the director of HR, or then director of HR, she's a good friend of mine, messages me and says, "There's something coming down the pike that I think you may be interested in. Hold tight." And I'm like, oh, interesting. And she can't, because she's under NDA and all that stuff. She couldn't say it. But it was this thing called VSI, Voluntary Severance Incentive.
Hmm.
And it was for management people, salaried people that were in positions of 10 years or more that could leave. So what my friend was actually saying is now these volunteers are going to leave, and there's going to be people that don't need to be filled some spots. So they're volunteering, looking, say you were a manager like
Yeah.
myself of reservation control. Can they absorb that position, or do they need to replace that person?
Yeah.
And can they replace that person within the ranks, or maybe from someone moving from another position that can be depleted?
Yeah.
Right. So it's just a great game of whatever you want to call it. Sorting out and matching, right?
Yeah.
And so what's great about that is they can reduce positions somewhere. So they had 151 volunteers they needed, right? And there's something inside of me, man. On Friday, I was just like, Amit, you're not 100% happy,
Hmm.
and something about this maybe an opportunity. I was reading online about what it takes to be a realtor, and it
Hmm.
said you need 4 to 6 months of salary if you want to be a full-time realtor. And when I did the math,
To make the transition.
you have to make the
easy.
transition exactly,
Yeah.
because you don't want to think about money,
Yeah.
having how to pay the bills. Because that's one thing I will say: if you ever think about getting into self-employment, you have to realize you always want to have 4 to 6 months. Ideally, you want to have about a half a year's of salary, saved up, or bills being able to be paid. So I looked at that. I looked at this lump sum,
Mm.
which after taxes
Yeah.
was like 28 grand. So it was like 10 grand in tax, because of the lump sum fees. But that was still enough. I was like, you know what?
So that was 4 months of living
That
expenses.
that was enough. Yeah, that was enough of living expense. So I said, you know what? Maybe I'll do this. So I thought about it. I consulted some people. I remember asking my dad, because my dad's always been my biggest sort of like career counselor,
Hmm.
and they've always kept me in the airline. There was 3 times when I almost left it up the door,
Yeah.
and I think it's because they have flight benefits. So that's probably when they're like, when
Wait,
they're
hold
like,
on.
wait a minute.
Let's rethink this.
They're like, wait.
Let's
I
talk
remember.
about
When
this.
the first time was when I was like 22.
What are you giving up?
They're like, we can't fly anymore, son. Like, this is yeah.
It's like,
So
let me just say it out loud.
they did. I remember my dad being very vocal the first time. The second time, I was going through the ranks, and he's like, just hang in there, and don't forget our flight benefits.
Yeah.
And the third time, this is right when I was a manager, and I was looking at other options. My dad's like, you've gone too far. You've gone too far. Plus our flight benefits.
Yeah,
like on top of that.
Yeah.
So the first question my dad had when I said I want to get into real estate, he said, "What about our flight benefits?" I'm like, well, I'm glad you're thinking about me, Dad.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And I said, well, that's cool, because this severance allows me to have 5 years of flight benefits still. Because 10 years I've been there, half that time would be your
Oh,
flight
wow.
benefits. So I said, my goal, and if you know anything about ROIs, right, return of
Yeah.
investment, my goal, Dad, is to return this investment in 5 years to you, so that in 5 years I can just buy your ticket everywhere you go. And I said, cool. Is
Yeah,
that
you
fair?
recently did a big trip for them, right?
Yeah,
Was
yeah.
a
And
year ago?
now my goal, and now I've
2
been
years
blessed
ago?
where I'm
Yeah.
at, and I put them. If I told them my goal now is, they give me a first class life, my job is to give them one back. So I put them in first class everywhere they go.
Wow.
And well, that's my goal. That's what I work hard for. Something that Chris has helped me kind of
Yeah.
visualize more is if you start manifesting it, if you start wanting to
Yeah.
do it, you got to be about it, right? You got to put yourself in that. You got to immerse yourself in that feeling.
Yeah.
And for my family, my mom and dad, I want them to know, because I've been in business class and I've been in first class,
Mhm.
and it feels magical.
Yeah.
It really does. You've been there, right?
It motivates you.
Motivates you.
Yeah.
And if that
Yeah.
doesn't motivate you, I don't know what will, right?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So for my family, it's more of I want them to feel proud of me. I
Yeah.
want them to feel proud of what they've created, and just give them some sense of like
Mhm.
luxury, because they've worked really hard their life. And so that's what I do. So I remember my dad asking about flight benefits. And one little side note from working for Alaska Airlines for 10 years, I've probably been in first class as a standby passenger,
Mm-hmm.
what they call standby, probably 50 times,
Mm-hmm.
in a young, 27-year-old, which is very rare for any other normal
Yeah.
person in their 20s, to go that many times. So I was very blessed to be able to do that. So, I got in there, and they had the 5 years for the five benefits. And my dad and mom liked that
Mm-hmm.
idea of it. I made sure they were going to be taken care of. Um, and he said, you know what, do what makes you happy.
Mm-hmm.
But my dad's greatest saying that I always share with people is, he said, do what you love and the money will come, which is absolutely true for anything.
Mm-hmm.
Do what you love and the money will come. And then he says, oh, and money is earned when you do something well.
Mm.
And it kind of, right around the same time he'd say that, he followed up by saying, just remember that. He goes, you only accept money for doing a job well done.
Yeah.
He always, basically, he was telling us when we were growing up, don't ever take a handout.
Mm-hmm.
Do a job and do it well,
Mm-hmm.
then get paid.
Yeah.
And so those are the two, like,
Earn your
pillars.
keep.
Yeah, those are the two things that I always keep in mind is I always want to do what I love,
Mm-hmm.
and the money will come, right? And his thing was a lot like, if you ever heard Jim Carrey's speech about his dad that went to a job that he never loved, for
Mm-hmm.
40 years and then passed away. My dad did a similar thing where he gave a speech to us, and he said, actually, sorry, not to us, it was to me specifically, because I'm contemplating lots of things, and he said, you know, I did a job that I never loved,
Mm-hmm.
but I loved you guys. You came from being a supervisor from Air Pacific to working on the assembly line at Suzuki of
Mm-hmm.
America, and broke his back literally. He,
Wow.
he actually dislocated his disc. He had some injuries. And, he just said, like I said, my father could have been a great comedian. He didn't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, what he said, instead of, what did he say? He said, I learned many lessons. I don't know if he sheds the part where we're talking about, which is
Yeah.
he went to a job that he never loved,
Uh-huh.
for 40 years. And he says, don't do that. Don't
Yeah.
be like my dad. And I would say, my dad gave me a blueprint about how to not to be like him as well, because he said, do what you love and the money
Yeah.
will come. He said, I loved you. So he gets, sorry, I get that's a little emotional, but like he said, I loved you guys. And he goes, so he did a job that he didn't like.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's it's commendable for any good father to do that. Say, sacrifice yourself, whatever the
Mm-hmm.
case is. So I remember that very much from my dad is that, those things resonate with me. So do what you love, right? The money will come.
Mm-hmm.
You'll figure out a way the money will work.
Yeah.
Is that it may not be the money you think you want, but it's the money you need to survive
Mm-hmm.
because you're loving what you do. And he said that's why he said that's why I'm doing the backbreaking job
Mm-hmm.
now,
Yeah.
so that way someday you can do what you love. So that was that resonated with me when I was doing this position change, and I said, you know what, let me get into the real estate business. Sure enough, my director, my friend, I put it in. My boss was so surprised. On Monday, I put it in because you have to put it in the next week, and she said, "What? You can apply?" I'm like, "Yeah." And she said, "Wow, that's crazy." And I said, "Yeah, I'm gonna go do real estate full time." And and my friend called me frantically. She's like, "What are you doing?
Yeah.
I just saw your name come across." She goes, "You're volunteering?" I'm like,
Yeah.
"Yeah." And she said, "I meant for you to wait because there's other positions opening up, and we'll
Right.
slot you somewhere else.
Yeah.
You're gonna be a great fit."
And
And
you're
I said,
like,
"Ah, it's too
no.
late," and so it
Hand
was,
your
yeah, I'd
badge
already
in.
made my decision. I already did
Yeah.
my sort of hunt for Red October. You remember where they all wrote letters back to their
Uh-huh.
families, thinking that it was going to be the end. That's kind of my hunt for Red October. That was my letter. And so it was cool, man. I really think that was a pivotal moment for me as a person in general, because I wanted to then go on my own, right?
Mm.
And sure enough, I got into real estate. What was cool about that is I left at the end of the year, right around Thanksgiving. They kept me on the payroll for like 9 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and they also gave my health insurance for 1 year,
Wow.
which is the other thing when you're
Subsidized?
when your own business. By the way, you have to get your own health
Yeah.
insurance, so that was cool too. So it was nice. And then when I got into real estate, I shopped around, and I went out to this company called Prudential Northwest. I started January 21st, which is coming up actually.
Yeah.
And so January 21st this month will be
They
19
turned
years.
into Berkshire
Yep,
Hathaway.
continued in
Right?
Berkshire. Yeah,
Yeah.
Berkshire purchased them or worked them.
Mm.
And this year will be 19 years licensed in the business.
19 years.
Yeah.
So what was the climate like in real estate back then when you started?
Yeah, so
Was it you just hang your shingle and
so
deals are coming in, or what was that
no,
like?
not like that so much. In 2005, when I started January 05, it was very much like a old school corporate office. that you would go to back like in the 80s, right?
Hmm.
There was still like a smokers area. There was still like there was people that still had brandy in their offices. In fact, I had a couple here and
Yeah.
there, with some rage agents. Very old school.
Yeah.
One
Like
guy was still
Mad
smoking a
Men
cigar in
style.
his
Yeah.
thing, even though you were supposed to. Like, yeah, very old school. A madman. Um, you try to do it outside. But anyways, that being said, the climate was very much like an old school boardroom, like a very
Mm.
madman. Yeah, you
Yeah.
having like this,
Having drinks during
yep,
the day.
having drinks and not everybody, but the top
Yeah.
producers.
Tough.
In that case, like the commercial guys were
Yeah.
big time and the top producers. And I joined that company, and you definitely felt like a brand new person.
Uh-huh.
You're like, oh man, this is a whole nother level, right?
Yeah.
But I also knew that I wasn't in a corporation because I'm just gonna say I don't use the names, but it's so funny. So I worked for Alaska Airlines. Alaska Airlines is a very conservative airline, if you may or may not already know, back then especially.
Yeah, I don't.
And they go through sensitivity training. I had to go through basically some little assessments here and there about making sure we're not saying things the wrong way,
Really?
how you behave. Definitely sexual harassment, for instance. That was a
Uh-huh.
big thing. Corporations, right? I watched many, many videos. We were part of many things. My first week in the business, I was in the
Mhm.
back room. I was in the computer trying to kind of get acclimated. I remember one realtor, a male realtor, who was a commercial guy, by the way, so
Uh-huh.
big timer.
Big time.
And this lady passed by, and he's like, he looks at it, he goes, "Hey, so and so, how you doing?" He goes, "Damn, those jeans look great on you."
Yeah.
He goes,
So that's a no at
"Yes, no, yeah,"
Alaska.
and he goes, and then he follows up and says, "Your butt looks amazing,"
Wow.
and I'm just like doing this, and I'm like, what just happened?
Checking to see
Did I
if
just?
there's
And I'm just
a
like waiting. I
sensitivity
put my
training.
hand down, and I'm just like, do, and I'm like, maybe this is people that know each other. She turns around, looks at him, she goes, "Oh my god, thank you so much. I've been working out." I'm like, what?
You're like, what world did I get in?
What just happened? That was the climate. If you want to know the climate, that was the climate.
Yeah.
People were kind of saying things and doing things that probably wouldn't be what corporations are doing, but that was happening still in our
Uh-huh.
field. And I think I was coming on the tail end of it because you go to other offices like older offices like
Yeah.
Century 21s and the old John L. Scotts and things
Yeah.
like that, old Coal bankers for sure. You'll find pockets of what I'm saying,
Right, right.
because people were just they
It was
were
the
they were
Wild
very
West.
direct,
Yeah.
and it was blew my mind. I was like, here I just came from 10 years of like sensitivity training, just get blown out in 1 week,
But that's interesting that the person receiving the message took it that way,
She did, yeah,
right? As
yeah,
opposed to take it offensively
yeah. It,
as an offense.
we
Yeah.
talk about this all the time about just our kind of modern culture, current culture versus previous. How you couldn't say that back then, and definitely you can't say
Well,
that.
yeah, you watch all the movies
Yeah,
from
yeah,
the 80s, 90s,
yes, yeah,
like some of the things like they'd be canceled today.
exactly. So that's kind of what that was about. I mean, when you mentioned about cancel culture, right? That's the big thing right now, and I think that there's some validity to cancel culture,
Mm.
but I also think that there's some things that remember it's culture. We shouldn't get rid of our culture.
Hmm.
We should understand what that means and what we're trying to lessen the offense of.
Hmm.
Like him saying those particular words to a woman in the office within earshot of me, for instance, may or may not fly today because maybe I was sensitive or maybe
Yeah.
she was sensitive or whatever the case is. But it's obvious they had a relationship that I
So
didn't know
how
about.
did you take that, and like where did you just kind of let it die off?
Of course,
Yeah.
100%, because when you're a newbie in anywhere,
Yeah.
you're not doing nothing. I'm not rocking no boat.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, "Wow," and then I mentioned it to another newbie person in the office. They're like, "Oh yeah, there," and she was like, "Oh, that's like normal in this business." And she happened to know other people in the business, and then she goes, "They know each other too.
Yeah.
They're like so and so good friends." I'm like, okay. So again, I knew there was a thing, but it was interesting that they would do it around a stranger, if you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
But that was a good example of that. But I also like the fact that I did end up befriending both of those people, along with everybody. We had 30 some odd people in the office, so there wasn't a ton
Yeah.
of people. So it was easy to befriend people at Christmas parties. We ended up forming our own little group, and in the beginning for me, you know, I think I said this earlier before we started this, is that money should never be the thing that we use as a measurement,
Hmm.
but at the same time, it is a unit of measurement.
Yeah.
We use it for
So
now
what would you say might be a better measurement on?
Well, what I say is in this case with money, I'd say money is like fuel, right?
Hmm.
It's like you want to have so much fuel to get where you're going, right?
It enhances who you are.
Yes, yeah. So,
Mhm.
but I would say it's going to be character, right? Like
Hmm.
to me, who you are as a character, like we kind of a tangent from our conversation, like and especially after getting into real estate, I've met a lot of people that are very successful,
Hmm.
not just in as a realtors, but people that like business owners, millionaires, people that are very well known, celebrities, things like that. And I will tell you that in the end, especially as we get older, maybe have more cycles in life, human character is important.
Hmm.
And I think there's a statistic out there about authenticity is the highest number to have like a relationship with somebody, right? Like
Hmm.
to provoke a relationship or provoke a sale or to invoke trust, you have to be authentic.
Hmm.
So something like people will notice authenticity way more than anything else.
Hmm.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So so that right there, I think to me, authenticity is kind of the unit of measurement. With that as part of your character, are you really authentic?
Hmm.
Because what happens a lot of times, and I was saying this right before off camera here. I was saying, um, sometimes we have to put on different roles. Like for instance, when we go into a corporate office and we want to we want to say something to our female
Yeah.
coworker, but we're in a corporation,
Yeah.
can't say
You
that.
can't say that. Yeah.
Now in a different atmosphere, maybe you can,
Uh-huh.
but because we had to change our role, we had to change the character we play,
Hmm.
right? So I think that that's understandable because we go through. We have to watch our p's and q's. Like I don't want to try not to swear on this
Hmm.
podcast, even though I
Yeah. Yeah.
swear in real life quite a bit,
Right.
and so try to be a little bit smarter about that. But am I still being authentic though? I think
Uh-huh.
that's the key element is just because you have to maybe wear a different hat or whatever the term is, doesn't mean that you can't be, you can still be authentic,
Yeah.
right? So another way to say that, the same thing that he said would be like, you know what, you're looking amazing today,
Yeah.
so and so. And you're like, yeah, keep it up, man. Are you working out or whatever
Yeah.
else? Are you looking great? Or maybe you don't even say that, but you just leave it
Yeah.
alone, right?
Well, now you just don't even say
You just
anything.
want to say that, yeah. Well, now you can't,
Yeah.
right? But I would say like if I had to redo it and say still be authentic to a person like that, I would say, hey, so and so, you're looking amazing. I just want you to know that. I just
Yeah.
want you to acknowledge that you look great. You got a great vibe or whatever the case is.
Hmm.
But again, it's a little sensitive nowadays with people. So I think that it's going to come down to us as a human civilization just to kind of like, I don't want to say give a few passes, but it's more like that instead of doing the cancel culture, saying, why are we canceling it? Like, is there something that we could still, gain from these things,
Hmm.
right? Because I think canceling people or letting go of people just because they don't have the same opinion as you is
Yeah.
not smart. And we do that a lot. But I was using that money example as a barometer because when I got into real estate, I wasn't sure kind of how to
Hmm.
measure my success, and so my only measurement was money.
Was money?
And
How many
so,
deals? And
how many deals, how many millions of sales? Now as a realtor, I
and
can
then
tell
they
you it's
posted up to let you
oh, they
know.
posted.
Yeah.
Yeah, shit. Realtors are the only ones that'll
Yeah.
do that. We're the only ones that have. Realtors and mortgage officers are the only ones that have pictures.
Yeah.
You know that. You know
It's
that
like
this
this is
because
the person
we were
that
we were
did this
told,
deal.
we're the
Yeah.
brand. So this is the McDonald's arch to you,
Yeah.
from myself to you, technically.
Uh,
So realtors would put their faces on the pictures, and we all know now it's 5 years, 10 years old,
yeah.
20-year-old picture, and there's a
Have you seen
dog
that
that's probably
episode
passed
with South
away.
Park
Yeah,
and
what?
realtors?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Which
So
one
I
is it?
think Cartman decides he wants to be in real estate,
Yeah.
and he, and he focuses on his headshot, and that's it. That's the money.
That's the one. That's the
Right.
one.
So right there,
Yes,
right
yes.
there.
Oh, that's right. I remember the watch. I remember the. Yeah, we got to do the watch, right? I got
Yeah.
the gold watch out too, buddy.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. There we go. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny, and that really is like, that's talk about.
What was your first deal like?
My.
So how'd you find your first client?
So what they say is, don't be a secret agent, meaning make sure you let everybody know you're doing real estate,
Yeah.
right? So don't sit
And
there and
remind
just
them.
assume and like sit here in the back seat and you're like in the back of the office waiting for a call because no one's gonna call you if you didn't tell anybody.
Yeah.
So I remember right away, right October, November, when as soon as I applied, started telling everybody. And of course, also being in my position, people knew that I was in a position of responsibility as a
Yeah.
manager. So now it was a little bit more serious. They're like, oh, well, if you can be a realtor, like I think that you'll do a good job because
Yeah.
you were in a higher authority position, if you will.
Yeah.
So I thought that was great. My first deal was actually one of my really good friends, and he and I were chit chatting, and he was talking about how he was thinking about moving, and I said, "Hey, I'd love to help you." So January is when I started hanging my license, January  21st, and my first deal closed. I want to say it was March 3rd. I have to
Oh,
remember.
wow.
So it was
3 months.
quick. It
Yeah.
was quick. Yeah.
So
Tech.
right in time to fill that.
Yeah, the 4 to 6 month gap we're talking
Yeah.
about. Yep, yep. And so it was really cool. And then that was actually one of two deals in March. I did a second one.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, my first.
How much did you make?
Gosh,
Like after you paid out all the.
after that's a good question.
Yeah.
I remember the end of the year, but the first one, I want to say because you do 50-50 split, all this other stuff. I want to say it was like $4,400 gross to the house, or to me, and then so whatever the taxes are out of that, so 3,300 roughly.
For the first deal.
Yeah, for
Oh,
the first deal,
nice.
3,300, which honestly felt really good, man. I
Yeah.
mean, it felt really good.
And how many weeks of pay was that?
That was in 30.
If you were to
Yeah,
still
if I
be
had to do the
at
math
last,
here,
yeah.
that's actually a great question. That would have been like at least 3 weeks of pay.
So in 3
Yep.
weeks,
hmm
and
Yep. Yep. And so what was cool about that is I had a second one, and that
mhm,
was roughly about the same amount too. So that was great. So I had a two payout month that
right,
year, but of course January, February there was $0 because
mhm,
I had just started.
yeah,
But what was cool about it is not that everybody remembers, but I remember this number, and I only say this not to boast, but to tell people that you should never limit yourself because it's an easy thing to do. And I always thought to myself, working in the airline, being a manager, making 50 minimum 53, I think it was $53,800 a year
mhm,
salary, which is a good salary for manager back in 04, 03.
mhm,
It wasn't boastful, it wasn't crazy, but it wasn't low. It afforded me things that I could do. And if you measure all the benefits and everything, it was like 75K,
uh-huh,
like with the health insurance and all
yeah,
this other stuff. Um, but that year I made $101,874.56, and I counted it
yeah,
every fucking cent because that was the greatest moment in my entire life
uh-huh,
of looking at this thing and realizing that I'd made a leap of faith and almost doubled what my salary would
right,
have been there. And of course, when you do the math, it was really more like 75K, but I made more. You
yeah,
know what I mean? And I did this all on my own. I did this all on my
uh-huh,
own, which of course the greatest part is my second deal was with my brother who referred me. My
mhm,
brother's been my top referrer
yeah,
in my entire life, and he and I have had our own brotherly love and hate and relationship. But tell you what, that guy will recommend everybody all the time,
yeah,
and he's great. And he loves it. He always tells great things about it. And that was my claim to fame.
mhm,
I always had great people in my corner supporting me. What we in our business call SOI, sphere of influence.
uh-huh.
It's the people that are within our circle or
They're your
within our sphere that would
cheerleaders.
share like,
Yeah,
hey, you should go to Tony.
yeah,
He does this, and you should go to Ameet. He's a realtor, right? Um, but yeah, that year, like I said, $101,874.56.
wow. Big shout out and a huge thank you to Zekin for making this happen. They have an amazing platform. Check out their website, zeacon.com, zeacon.com.
You know, and again, not that I remember it, but I do. Of course, I
Yeah,
remember it because I
that's
wanted.
a
I
big
want.
deal to
I
make
didn't know. I
6.
never thought I'd make six figures in my life. Is
Yeah,
what I'm getting at. In my
in
lifetime,
real
I
estate,
never thought
right?
I would
Yeah,
ever make six figures. That's sad.
yeah,
That's a limiting belief that I'm
uh-huh.
glad I got rid of. And I
And you
think
figure a
that
lot of people have that belief,
everyone does.
right?
Well, I shouldn't say everyone because I'm not everyone, but I would like to think that I was in the majority of that thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I think the majority of our thinking is that we limit ourselves not to think that we could do this or do that. And if anything, real estate has taught me, and being self-employed has taught me, is you are the creator of your universe,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um,
Now,
Buddha has a
did you
saying.
keep a lot of vision boarding or
Yeah, I know. It's
yeah?
funny. I didn't vision board then. I do now, but at
Okay.
that time, I really didn't do that. But I have this great Buddha saying that I love, that my ex-wife had given me, and I love the saying behind it. And I remember her little note. She used to write little notes when we were dating, and she would say, "I saw this quote," and she goes, "There's two people that I know 100% that do this.
Yeah.
It's my dad, who had
Uh-huh.
passed. Our dad had passed away, unfortunately, and you."
Mm-hmm.
And she goes, "And you do that so well." And she said, and the Buddha quote says, "Put the people and the things around you that you love,
Mm-hmm.
and with all your heart, give yourself to it. Now you created your universe."
Ah.
And so I'll say that one more time because I think it's the best saying. Put the people and the things around you
Mm-hmm.
that you love, and with all of your heart, you give yourself to it, and now you've created your universe.
Your own
He goes,
universe.
"Yes,
Yeah.
yes." So I don't know if you're going to find that one, but we'll see. But I do have that, and I still have it written up with the Buddha, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love about that saying is because think about the things that you love and the people that you love, right? So in this case, with real estate, for instance, my brother and I got to chat more often. He was referring me.
Mm-hmm.
I should have probably done a better job, fostering that like that year, like go take him lunch or whatever. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But put the people and the things around you that you love. I love talking.
Yeah.
I love having a conversation with people. In real estate, you help. To me, it's soul food. You're helping somebody make the biggest purchase they've ever made in their entire life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, but the people and the things around you that you love.
Wow.
And with all your heart, you give yourself to it. Now you created a universe. And for me, that's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
I created this universe that was full of like me doing things that I loved, and with the people that I loved it with.
Right.
And so of course my first check like I've done in the past. I gave it to my parents.
Mm.
That like my dad always did a little prayer. My dad has photocopies of my first check.
Wow.
And still to this day, my dad has a little file for all of us.
Uh-huh.
And I remember when I showed him the six figures, and he just prayed. He had a little tear, and he said, "Proud of you."
Yeah.
So he said, "I knew you could do this." So it was really, really good. Uh, but yeah, that's what I was hitting people is that that's such a weird, limited belief that I had at one
Mm-hmm.
point. And then the year after, I crushed that number.
Mm-hmm.
You get what I'm saying? And of course, we won't talk about the years after because then that went 06. I started doing some flips. 07, in 08, I
think,
had
yeah.
5 properties, and 4 of them were rentals. And by the time 2012 came around for me, I was divorced, bankrupt. I lost my properties, or I sold them all.
So how did you deal with that? Because that's a
man.
big that's like the economy collapsing on you,
Oh, the economy.
personal life
Yeah.
collapsing. So now you went on this high of you've doubled your income or tripled it by then or quadrupled it by then,
Yeah.
have all these assets
Yeah.
to back to zero.
Yeah, I mean, I would say
And
that it
what
was
was
definitely over double the income, and had these properties, and I just, it was one of those things where I may or may not have told you, but one of the properties that I bought in '06, for some reason, I had this scope of like I can do anything, and which is great. It's a great. And I don't want to
Yeah.
I don't want to limit that. But my anything I had to remind myself that where's my business coming from? It was Seattle. I had built up a great network of relationships
Mhm.
here, so my license was in Washington or Seattle. Well, at the time, we had an opportunity. My ex-wife and I, then wife and I, had an opportunity to move to Vegas.
Mhm.
The numbers made sense. We were about to buy a house here. We're actually having a house built here, a beautiful, 3,300 square foot
Yeah.
house. We'd already had the money put up and all that, and then this opportunity came, and something about Vegas was like, man, I've always wanted to live in Vegas,
Yeah.
and because I'm in this new sort of found like sort of nothing can stop me moment. Let's buy a house in Vegas.
Mhm.
So I bought a house in Vegas, and that was probably
How
in my
much were
opinion,
houses back then?
man. So what's crazy is this house was 620,000 the year before in '05.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in '06, I bought it for 515. And I remember doing the math. Again, I'm good at math overall, so I'm like, me and my buddy who have moved around the same time, and that's one of the reasons that I moved there is because my good buddy Kevin said, "Hey, I'm moving to Vegas. Parents live there. The economy is dipping a little bit, but I think we can hedge the bet." And we both agreed it's going to go down another 10%, right? It's gone down about 15, 20 at the time, another 10%,
Mhm.
30% adjustment. No problem. So we go to Vegas. I buy my house at 515. We put 10% down,
Yeah.
thinking that's gonna be good. Well, in 2011, when I went to the bank, it was deed in lieu of foreclosure at 265.
265.
Yeah, so over half that. And what's the
And
unfortunate
that's
part
3
about that?
years after the
3 years, yeah. So we bought it in '06. So we moved there in July 21st of '06. I tried to do the flight thing back and forth because remember I had flight benefits,
Mm-hmm.
and so I could fly back and forth for free. And so my goal was this lofty goal of
Mm-hmm.
keep your license in Washington, get another one in Nevada,
Yeah.
and start to become a realtor in both areas. And obviously, it's a great idea, but the problem is I had this pool in in my house in Vegas, and I felt like I was semi-retired, and I got a little ahead of myself, a little cocky,
little lazy, maybe.
I was enjoying it too
Yeah.
much, and I have another saying because of that debacle. I would say that overindulgence of anything is bad.
Yeah.
Of anything. So anything that you think is good is bad. It
Yeah.
can be bad at the same time.
That's in the Bible.
Is it?
It has to be.
Yeah, it's gotta
Yeah.
be. It's gotta be like overindulgence.
Yeah.
Like fill your cup, but don't overfill.
It's like
Don't drown yourself.
Gluttony.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. So in this case, I had tasted this amazing part of success. In my beginning of halfway of '06 when we bought the house, I was already at the numbers that I was at the end of '05. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I was already at the six-figure mark halfway through. I was like, man, you're a freaking stallion.
Yeah.
Man. Things are
It's
happening.
like
I was 29 years old,
unstoppable.
5 properties, almost 100 grand in the bank,
Yeah.
feeling great, married. Oh man, life was great. But just like things happen, and I won't get into all the details, but we had to come back to Seattle. I tried to reestablish work here, but as you know,
So you short sold all the
I short sold that
properties.
2009.
Yeah.
The market started dipping with predatory lending issues like that. 2010, 11, and then in 2009 I went through my separation, divorce in 2010. So it was just a lot of things happening.
Hmm.
And you would ask the question about, well, what do you do? Well, how do you bounce back from that? I think that you don't bounce back from it. I think what you do is you. It's almost like you. If you're out there hiking somewhere, you made camp and it was great, but you stayed for a while.
Yeah.
You just do your best to ignore that site altogether and
Yeah.
you just
Yeah.
go on another place. But the one thing I remember is you don't forget the skills you learned of what you did to build that camp.
Hmm.
So I had to remember that quote again. I had to do the things that I love. At the time, I was doing things that I didn't care for. The market was down. I think
But you're still in the
still
game.
licensed. I will tell you that it was hard to be licensed because you have to pay money to get licensed, right?
Hmm.
So in the beginning, when money's coming in, no problem. But I remember when the money was short. I mean, $1,250 just to keep licensed every year, excuse
Yeah.
me, on top of your other dues and things like that.
And
Gosh,
you weren't doing any deals.
yeah, I had. I want to say in 2010, it was now that short sales were happening and foreclosures were happening. I want to say I had 6 deals total,
Hmm.
and that's the national average. I think is 4.5.
Wow.
And that's remember there's part-time realtors too. So 6 deals is not a lot, and I want to say that year I made like $22,000, something
Hmm.
like that in real estate, and so that was tough.
Yeah.
It was a tough year for a lot of us. I mean, it was a lot of people got out. And I think you and I were chatting about this the other day.
Yeah, no, that's
but
happening right now
that's happening right now. But you know
Yeah.
what's interesting
for
is
different
the
reasons.
amount of realtors that have come into the business since 2012, I'd say. So let's say about 10 or 11 years. I would say 80% of the realtors that are currently out there now, and I'm sure the math is correct, but I'm good at math. So
Yeah.
let's just say let's say
Yeah.
Amit's calculation is correct. 80% of the current realtors right now have started within the last 10 years. And I'm sure
Mm.
there's a matrix we can pull for that. But I would say that they've been licensed. The problem with that I see, and this is something I do want to touch on today as well for people is there's going to be a change. Cycle goes 7 to 9 year cycles. We've been waiting for this cycle for a while. Not to say to be afraid of it. It's more like there's always been an adjustment period. 7 to 9 year cycle. Well, the last cycle started changing at around 2012, 2013.
Hmm.
What's 7 to 9 years after that? 7 years is
Word.
2020,
Yeah.
right? 9 years is 2022. But what did we have during 2022? COVID.
Hmm.
We also had money pumped in the economy. So in order to
So there's a
understand,
delay of
there's
that.
exactly.
Yeah.
So we understand there's a statistic right here. There are
Mhm.
more than 60,000 have left the profession since 23. That's crazy.
So
Is
how
that just in
many
Washington?
how many realtors today in Washington,
Yeah, I have to say, if
or even nationwide and Washington?
yeah, it's
You
it's
know.
it's crazy, man. I would say that the it's just like anything, right? Like I don't want to say gold rush, but when the going gets good, a lot of people start
Hmm.
seeing it. And being in this business, one thing that I probably should have prefaced in the beginning when I got in real estate is the two golden rules to live by in real estate. The things that I mentor agents on is when you're in this business, our job is to look out for clients' best interests. The reason I did well the first year is because I really embodied that statement.
Hmm.
My job is to look out for your best interests. And the number two thing that I got from the top producer at the time, the number one person at the office, she told me, never look at your clients as a paycheck. And her exact
Hmm.
words were, the minute you look at your clients as a paycheck, get the fuck out of my business.
Yeah.
Because she said, now you're not in it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
I don't want you in this
And
business.
you're gonna make
And you're gonna
them
stink
look
it up.
bad.
She had
Yeah.
she was very bold. Remember I said they were bold back then.
Yeah.
Then she told me, she goes, kindly get the F out of my business.
Yeah.
I don't want you sticking it up for the rest of us.
Hmm.
She goes, because that's not what you're doing. Number one rule is look out for client's best interest.
Yeah.
Number two, the advice she gave after that is when you're going through it and the bills are hard to pay, and this helped me get through my time. And she goes, if you look desperate for that money or the sale, people will feel it.
Hmm.
And she goes, and you won't get that sale, and then you won't get the next sale. It'll be like a stench on you.
Yeah.
And she goes, don't get that. Don't
Right.
ever get that.
Hmm.
And she goes, because people will feel it and they see desperation. And then she goes, and they won't want to work with someone that's desperate because they don't know if you're being, true.
Hmm.
And I'm telling you, that held me, I should probably tell her that, that held me through a lot of it because it was tough, not making any money, trying to have bills paid. And if you've been through any debacles and, having to call which company that I wouldn't pay that month,
Yeah.
having the $35 freaking draft fee from Bank of
Yeah.
America, which is ridiculous. It was tough, but I had to hold
So you
close
held
to my.
true to that
Yes,
principle. Yeah.
absolutely. And I think that's the key element. And I teach everybody that is that the last 10 years though, unfortunately, maybe especially the last 5 or 6, I'd like to think that everybody still follows that policy, but I've seen deals where the agents are looking at it as the money.
Hmm.
And they're looking at it as just either a quick payday or a quick payout or a quick and easy way to go. And that's not what that's not what the
Yeah.
business is about. yes, the business can be about that.
So when did you start seeing things turn?
I would say,
Because it sounds like you kept doing the work even though the money wasn't all there, right?
mm-mm.
So where was it where you're like, oh, okay, now I can breathe?
Well, so when I had a
Because
janitorial
you're
business as
dealing with a
well.
lot at that point.
Yeah, I had a lot of things to offset my income. I had janitorial business. Luckily, I was just doing things to make ends meet. But when the market started changing, right around 2014, so 2013, we saw trickles of it. All of a sudden, because the rates were obviously lower, so they
Mm.
couldn't lower rates
Yeah.
anymore. I think we were down to 2.5% or 3% if you were lucky. It was crazy low.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but it wasn't the rates I was doing it. It was just people's consumer confidence. Also, everything changed with lending. So right around 2013, 2014, we saw the shift, and then 2015 and 16 we saw it getting steady. In my opinion, I saw the peak started right around 2016, 2017, and then of course you fast forward to 2019 when the pandemic started kind of happening at the end of the year,
Yeah.
and then we put money in the economy right when it was. I was telling people in 2019 it should have dipped, or 2020 should have
Yeah.
dipped. But then 2020, the economy gets filled up with,
Freaking skyrocketed.
yeah. I mean, everybody and their brother got money from
Yeah.
whatever reason. You get either the PPP, if you had a business, or you got money from unemployment. And unfortunately, that's what's caused our situation now. And so, if you look back, that was really tragic, unfortunately. But of course, as a realtor, if you were in the business, you were loving it because you're, like I said, at the time, not in so much '05, but I've heard about this happening like in Vegas and Florida back in '03, '04, '05. You just stayed in your office and you just waited for people to come in and write
Yeah.
an offer. You didn't even have to go show the property. That's how
Uh-huh.
crazy it was back then. Now, it wasn't for me, but I heard stories like
Yeah.
that, which was true stories and true realtors that would tell you. They were like, we were so busy just writing offers. That's how much like money I was making,
Mhm.
basically. And each could be anywhere from 3 to 5 grand or more.
Yeah.
And of course with Seattle, the income we're talking in '05 when I made that, the average was like 270,
Uh-huh.
300,000 for a home, right?
So now it's
And
like a
now the
mill.
average is what's almost 700,000
Yeah.
right now. 752, I think. Yeah, we have to see what the current average median or the median is right
That's
now.
like
But
what 24,000 off the bat.
yes, yes. So exactly. So you do if you do 3%, which most times is 3%. You write into it. Yeah, 564 is now the median, and that's double.
Mm.
Double what it was in '05, right? A little over double. But anyway, so yeah, so they obviously the numbers have changed now. So instead of the 4, it's going to be like closer to 8,
Mhm.
or more, and per transaction. So people are doing really well for themselves. But what I think is happening right now is what happened with me in Vegas. I think that a lot of people are very confident, like I was in '06, about what's going to happen here in the near future.
Mhm.
And I think that unless you have some sustainable cash
Yeah.
or some kind of cushion,
Uh-huh.
uh, you might be in for a little surprise.
Mhm.
So what I think is going to happen, this is the unpopular opinion. All the realtors that are telling you right now is going to be a seller's market, is still a seller's market. To me, unpopular opinion, it's not a seller's market. It's going to be a debacle market. It's going to be a
Mm.
buyer's market. Maybe not a debacle like we were used to. Definitely not a debacle back when like '09,
Yeah.
10, 2011. But I do believe that our consumer confidence is probably at one of the lowest it's been. One of the biggest categories, if you look at any matrix, the 25 to 35-year-olds are one of the biggest buying classes, and they're not
Mhm.
buying. I don't know if you know this or not, but they're not. You know why they're not buying?
Right.
Because they're not confident about what's happening, or with all of them being able to move around or do remote work,
Mhm.
why are they going to stay in one place?
They're happy renting.
They're happy renting.
Yeah.
And we
Short
have this
term.
term called DINKs. You heard of that, right?
Yeah.
DINKs, DINK, dual income, no kids.
Yeah.
Those folks are loving their life. They're traveling. They're enjoying their life.
They're
They've
not
got dual
tied to a
incomes.
mortgage.
And their
Yeah.
incomes in Seattle, for instance, 6 figures. Let's say
Mhm.
after 3 or 4 years of most any like corporate position. Let's
Yeah.
say, especially in tech.
Tech.
If
Yeah.
you're in tech, let's use tech for that example because
Yeah.
I can't say any corporation, but let's say tech corporation. If you're an engineer, 3 to 5 years, you're already 6 figures. If you're
Mhm.
not already before that,
Yeah.
and so you and your partner now both make 6 figures. That's 200 grand. That's top 1%
Yeah.
now. We're pushing 1.5, 2%, right? And so, what are you doing with your
Yeah.
life? Yes, you can buy a house, and that'd be great, but we're now looking at a situation where the people that have the buying power and the buying ability are not buying, and I would
Mhm.
say that they're a smart category of people. They're not obviously, you know, uh, they are calculated about what they're
Mhm.
doing.
Yeah.
So what I think we're in for, in my opinion, is our calculations are telling us that it's easier to sometimes rent and be a little bit more free with our schedules than stay somewhere and do a 30-year fixed mortgage. And that feels like, oh my gosh, this is like a such a permanent thing, right? And I don't want to say that people are scared of commitment like that, but I think it's more of a they're being calculated about their interest. If they do this, they can stay around, So and you can see it in Seattle by the evidence of the cranes. Look how many cranes, and I think 80% of those are all
like rentals.
Tenants, exactly, rentals. Yeah, you're here. Median income for houses. See, July 1920. Yep, Gen Xers, young boomers, older boomers. So those guys are well. They're I bet you that matrix has changed quite a bit even since Gen 2020, because our Gen Xers and our younger boomers, if you will, are doing that. I would say I don't know where I'm at. I'm probably younger boomers because I'm not an old boomer. um, and we definitely have a different scope now, and I think that we need to look at it from that angle. So consumer confidence, it's a election year, a re-election year, if for Biden, for instance. So is people getting, again, consumer confidence? There's a war going on. There's many wars going on right now.
So what are you advising your agents?
Well, what I would tell people is so here's the thing with real estate. The greatest thing about real estate is people still need to buy and sell. There's still work transfers. There's life changes. Unfortunately, I've had to handle 3 divorces this year, for instance. There or marriages, things like that. So there's always going to be people that still need to buy and sell.
Yeah,
that's always going to be the case. And someone like me that's been in the business almost 20 years will always be able to deliver on those needs, right? That's the blessing for me, for instance, versus a new realtor right now. Is a realtor like me has already have some built up relationships where people are going to need to sell their home now that I've sold them 10 years ago to get into a bigger home because they had kids, So that's a blessing for me. But when you're a new agent getting in, you may not have that depth to go into yet. So consumer with the consumer index does show that we're down, and I guarantee we're even lower than that in 2024. And you see in 2020, right when COVID and things were happening, that was low, right? And so what I feel is happening, we're gonna hit probably those lows again, maybe even enough now lower. That's gonna keep people from wanting to buy right away. The rates are going to drop, but here's where I understand the new realtors, and there's some great realtors that started the last 10 years. I've worked with a lot of you, but what I will tell you that some of you are missing, 80% of you at least, is that the cycle continues. It's a cycle for a reason. And I know math. And there's always a parabolic equation for everything.
Yep.
You do not beat math.
So when was the cycle before 2008?
2012.
No, before 2008, what was the other real estate crash?
The other normalization, they call it, if you will, was 1999 to 2001. So right around 2001, and then 2002, 3, 4. You remember Florida increasing, Arizona increasing. If you remember back then, they were increasing in value. So you see and here you go with the real estate cycle, right? It talks about sort of the cycle. The only difference here, actually, what says the rents decreasing, is Seattle is a unique market. I always say it's an anomaly market because we're still a baby San Francisco, and so meaning if you compare our salaries to San Francisco, when it comes to tech, for instance, very similar, except San Francisco is still a little more pricier when it comes to the rent and of course housing. So
and what you get.
Yeah, exactly. So we actually we've always been, I'm sure you've heard that term, we've been considered like a baby San Fran. So that's the only thing that you see. We won't see so much a rent decrease, is our rents are still increasing, but that's still keeping people from wanting to purchase a home right now. Because I think that where that consumer confidence comes in is, are they permanent here?
Yeah.
I think a lot of us have seen some nomadic activities, if you will, from people now. Myself included. Like I traveled, I just took a month off. And so it was one of those things where, being able to do that more often and working from abroad is easier. So some people that are making good salaries, Texas has blown up, right?
Yeah.
Midwest.
But even in Texas, you can go parts of Texas and find like 4,000 square foot house for like 260,000.
Yeah.
So what is it about that market that piece of wood used to build that house costs less than the same piece of wood here in this state?
Man,
because you couldn't even build a house for 260 here for that size.
Yeah. What's crazy is when I was going to move to Vegas, this is almost exactly kind of similar home that my ex-wife and I were looking at.
Those are beautiful homes.
We had an option to move to Dallas. And for Dallas, for $350 in Dallas versus $520 in Vegas, or $550, we could have got an acre with like a pool, 3,500 square foot, huge, kitchen, huge everything. for 350 back in 2006,
Yeah.
right? So you're right. You know, and this is like we're talking about like a nicer area, like
Uh-huh.
one of the, like Bellevue type areas.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is I always question that. I'm like, you know, I have a house in Oklahoma. I have an investment property out there, and you know, the homes there are 100,000 some places, depending outside of Oklahoma
Yeah.
City.
Same piece of wood.
Same piece of wood,
Right? Probably
same
same
piece of wood.
supplier.
Yep. So supply and demand, right?
Yeah.
That's what again the baby San Francisco, if you will, Seattle is you know has um, a situation here where they have a lot of high salary people
Yeah.
that are needing places to stay. So it's kind of like that again, supply and demand, right?
Supply and
There's a big demand for people wanting to get good real estate. So because of
But
the lack of supply,
is it really good real estate? I mean,
I mean,
have you
in
seen?
their eyes, yes.
Yeah. Have you seen an LA listing?
Oh no, I agree. So I think that you know,
It's like $2 million house,
yeah,
and it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
1,000 square feet.
It really is. This is actually really
Fixer upper.
yeah. This is a really good thing right here. Changes in house prices since the real estate bubble. There you go. See, median house value 2017. This is 2017, which you know since then we've gone astronomically. I think you
Yeah.
know. So you know just to go show you, like you like said, like Texas was 42%. Geez, like Oklahoma where I was at, you know, that's 33%. Yeah, so I mean it's gone up quite a
Mhm.
bit. So
Why Oklahoma though? Why over there?
well,
For you at
in my
least.
case,
Yeah.
a good friend of mine was looking for a place. He knew that he wasn't in the position to purchase, but he knew that I'd have been. I
Mm.
was looking for something, and he had asked me if we can join forces and do something like that. And long story short, in order to help him out, I basically just bought the house, and
And you're
he's
renting
now
it
my
back to him.
tenant. Yeah,
Okay, good.
yeah. So I get
Now, is there
you
like
know,
a lease to own?
yeah, yes and no. I mean, it's more of a you know he's just paying the monthly. It's better than having my money sit in the bank, if you will.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and I'll tell you actually, I bought this house in Oklahoma. It's called Elk City,
Mhm.
8,000 people, and I bought the house for $53,300.
Wow.
A house,
A
2 bedroom.
house.
I didn't even believe it. I said, "Are you sure it's a
Yeah.
house, not a manufactured home or something else?"
That's more.
And so I flew down.
That's less than a lot of cars.
I flew down that weekend. Kicked it around, saw it, put a earnest money down of $500, 500 whopping dollars to buy the home, and I bought it all cash.
What's it worth now?
And now it's worth 86,000.
Wow.
And I bought it in 2021. So what is that? Just not even 3 years yet.
Yeah.
So in 2021 to now, you know,
So people should people be flocking to Oklahoma? And
you know, I just recently said this.
I mean,
You
I've
know,
seen homes in Cleveland for 15,000.
well, you know, and Detroit just had that same thing.
Yeah.
Well, if you're looking for an emerging market, I think that the Oklahoma City market is going to be a great emerging market. When you compare Oklahoma City to the closest one, which is like Nashville, for instance, I believe Nashville has something like 691,000 people, and Oklahoma City has 640,000 people. And when you weigh the averages out, average salary, I want to say is like 40,000, 42,000 in Nashville, and it's right around the same
Mm.
in Oklahoma City. But the average home is 250 in Oklahoma,
Wow.
where it's 420 in Nashville. So when you do the comparison,
Yeah.
right, it's a big difference maker. So what I think is going to happen is that number is going to get closer and closer over the years for Oklahoma,
Mhm.
because a lot of people in Texas now I've heard are going. Oh, I know from my realtor in Oklahoma, they're moving into Oklahoma because it's cheaper,
Cheaper.
and Oklahoma and Dallas is getting expensive. And I think there's also this people say don't California my Texas because a lot of Californians have moved to Texas, and I think what I'm hearing from my group of people that I know in the Midwest is that they're really frustrated. A lot of the old stubborn Texans are frustrated that it's becoming a little bit more California, like
Yeah.
the gastropubs and whatever else are
Oh.
going up, and you know, and again, that's whatever you want to call it. You know, that's life, I guess. You know, so these guys are moving more where they can go towards the. I'm moving to Oklahoma, where you
Yeah.
know we can be a cowboy. You know,
Yeah.
so some people are that's not for everybody, but yeah, so it's very interesting. But I would say Oklahoma City, yes. Take a look at the prices there. I think it's great. It's a great market. You know, years ago in 2012, when I didn't have the money, I was calling South Carolina, Charlotte actually.
Mhm.
Charlotte is it Charlotte, South Carolina? I believe, yeah. Charlotte. It was the place that I believe was going to move next. And if you look at it, it's one of the top 7 cities now.
Really?
Yeah, Charlotte's moved up quite a bit. So, but now you can. I wouldn't go to Charlotte or Austin now,
Mhm.
but Charlotte or Austin in 2013 and 14 would have been great places. My suggestion would be Oklahoma City now.
Mm-hmm.
And so Oklahoma City, Jacksonville, Florida, lots of places. And basically, the main thing you got to look for is rent. So in that matrix where I said with Nashville, I think Nashville rent for a 2 bedroom was like, I don't know, $12.50, but in Oklahoma City it was like $11.50. So it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't that far off. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But you're paying less money, and you're getting almost the same rent.
Wow.
So keep that in mind. Like, that's what you look for when you look for anything is cash
Mm-hmm.
flow, right? So yeah, Oklahoma City is definitely, in my opinion, again, in my radar. I'm actually looking at right now. You can get a multifamily there, a duplex, for $300K
Mm-hmm.
in Oklahoma City, which is the bigger city, not Elk City, which is
Yeah.
smaller. You can get a fourplex for about $450 right now. 500,
Mm-hmm.
which is nothing. You can't even touch that. You can't even
Yeah.
touch a duplex here for under 700,000. And that's like the outskirts of Seattle, not
Not
across
the
Seattle
yeah.
proper. Yeah. So, in the end, what I would tell people is do your math, obviously, and find it. Oklahoma City's not for everybody. If
Yeah.
you go out there, it's a big breeze. It is tornado country. I have a shelter in my house. It's I can barely fit in it.
Yeah.
It's made for, like, I think 2 people,
Yeah.
but it's like you basically just squish in face, like there's a little cutout for your face, and you close this door behind you, and you just hope for
And
high
you just
heaven.
wait.
You just wait.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool. Anyways, yeah. So here you go. The Oklahoma, see how the transactions have gone up over the years, and you see it. It's you see the graph, and math doesn't lie. See, back in the '90s, it was not. It was kind of a little steady, but now as we're getting closer to the market from 2016, which I said was kind of moving up. See, especially after 2020, because what happened in 2020, COVID,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know about you, Tony, but I'm a city kid all my life. But when COVID happened, I was starting to look for land in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
50 acres, serious, man. I'm like, maybe I'll grow my own
Get
vegetable
some
garden,
guns.
some chickens.
Yeah.
Definitely guns.
Self-sustain. Watch for the zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, but put some solar panels out and just live and have a little cup of Joe
Yeah.
with my shotgun. There you go. Move. It said, what did they say? Move out west? I'm moving back east,
No, I got a brother in the military, and back in the day, they were training for pandemics.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Were they really?
Yeah.
Oh, crazy.
Like what happens with civil unrest and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah. I just realized we were going a little over time, but
Yeah.
it's fine. Well, we can always. I don't know how you piece this together.
No. Yeah, we can cut everything you want.
Oh, okay.
We can take a break.
Yeah. No, this is fun, man. This is great. I love that we. I hope it's okay that we skipped around so much, but it kind of has this little chronological order, I guess.
That's great. It's great.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me share this stuff. This is fun.
Yeah.
You make it so comfortable. Like, I didn't even know we were recording until JD over there was starting to put stuff, and I'm assuming you incorporate this into your slideshow. That's pretty cool. That's smart. Because one thing I told JD is I want to start mine, right? And
you should.
I guess we could touch about it here is well, you mentioned on this earlier, like, what do you measure when it comes to a human, like a person?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I remember you touched on, and we've talked about this, is what do we measure people by, if you will, if you wanted to measure people. And I was saying it's human character. And I think that we all know when people are being genuine or not.
Yeah.
And we usually feel a certain way.
Yeah, your gut tells
your gut tells you. You have your gut instinct.
Yeah.
Usually. And what I would tell people is, in my time now that I've sort of been in a few cycles, few different arenas, met definitely a lot of people. I think to me it's about you just you being genuine. Like authenticity is very important. I think that I'll use this example. You've traveled. You've been to New York.
Yep.
Okay.
Several
You like
times.
New York?
I like it to visit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what did you not like? Actually, that's a great question.
It just felt so like there's no trees, nothing like
yeah.
that.
Okay. Yeah. What do you think about the people, though?
People, I mean, they weren't bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd say they weren't bad, but
yeah,
everything you hear about New York is like, oh, the people are rude,
mean, or rude.
Like,
exactly.
Right? Actually, they were fine.
Well, so I'm using New York as an example because one thing about New Yorkers that I know, I have friends that are New Yorkers. I've been to New York several times. What I love about the real New Yorkers, they tell you like it is.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with our West Coast mentality is not everybody tells you like it is. They'll be really nice to your face, and then they'll take you from the back, And so New Yorkers, the whole like, hey, I'm walking here, whatever that.
Yeah.
They're just
telling you, hey, I'm walking here.
Here's the thing with exactly, and here's the thing with New York that you may or may not already know. If you watch New Yorkers, real New Yorkers, they pull the door off for people. They still pull the door off for people. I was just there recently with my dad in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, I had this before my dad's experience. It was always positive with New Yorkers, and my thing with New Yorkers is they tell you the truth right away,
Hmm.
and you may not want to hear the truth. That's the problem with the truth is what it hurts sometimes.
Hmm.
Not everybody's ready for the truth. Not everybody wants the truth.
Yeah.
And so I will tell you, but true New Yorkers will tell you how it is to feel the truth. When I was there with my dad in the wheelchair, my mom had her knee surgeries.
Hmm.
We got out of the restaurant and we had a reservation, but the table was down the way.
Yeah.
And I remember people mid chew see my dad in a wheelchair, get up, and they
Uh-huh.
got off the chair and they pushed their seats in, and they had people get up, get up, get up, get up. We got a guy in a wheelchair needing to go
Yeah.
through. Man, it was such a great feeling. The service, not one person like,
Wow.
oh, ugh, like, and I would hate to say it, but in Seattle, I think people would golf.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, why couldn't they sit them over here in the front? Why are they doing it in the back?
Yeah.
Not one person in that restaurant cared that my dad was in a wheelchair, or not cared that it was an inconvenience.
Yeah, that
They
it
knew
kind
that
of
my dad was in a
interrupted their
wheelchair.
meal. Yeah.
And because I said, well, my dad can get up, and the front guy with food in his mouth. No, 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 no. He goes, come on, sir, come here. And he opened the door. He told everybody to get up. And it was just the nicest thing. And that was literally our experience in New York everywhere we
Wow.
went. Everyone, as soon as they saw, because the thing is, they do for people that can't do for themselves.
Mm.
But if you're able-bodied walking around by yourself and you're like, hey, where's this? They're not going to answer you. You know why? Because you didn't greet them. You didn't say, I'm going to be like, hey, excuse me, can I ask you a question? If you ever go to New York again, anybody listening, if you go to New York again, do yourself a favor. If you run into a real New Yorker, say, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
And watch your demeanor change. If you go up there like we do in Seattle and be like, hey, where's Broadway and Fifth?
Yeah.
They'd be like, fuck you looking at? And they go
Yeah.
away, right? Or be like, I'm walking here, whatever, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? They're not going to answer you. But
Mm.
New Yorkers are actually the nicest, truthful people because guess what? Truth deserves the truth. So when you come in and be like, excuse me, can I ask you a question? I'm not joking, their demeanor changes. They'll be like, how can I help you?
Yeah.
They could be doing something. I remember going to street sweeper. He looked irritated and I said, hey man, would you mind if I ask you a question? Yeah, man, go ahead.
Yeah.
Turned from this like grumpy looking guy, like he asked me the right way. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
And he says, da-da-da, and they'll stop everything. They're like, you gotta go down this way. You gotta make a left here. Da-da-da. With my dad, when we were there, I told you he was in a wheelchair. You know, the we were getting into an Uber, and I remember the bus was honking at people because they were double parking before my Uber came, and the new bus came, and I was like, we're gonna get honked at it, and the bus put his thing
Yeah.
down, and he goes, take your time.
Yeah.
You can hear you can see his lips. Take your time.
Yeah.
Got my dad in the Uber, everything. He was like, don't even worry about it.
Wow.
He stopped the whole bus. But earlier, these buses are honking. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, that's New York to me. And the reason I'm mentioning that with New York is we all need to we could take a lesson there.
Mhm.
If we all just learn how to tell the truth a little better to each other, I think that we can work on our,
In a digestible. way.
yes, in a
Yeah.
way that is digestible.
Yeah.
You know, maybe New York is not the answer all the time. I get it, especially for this West Coast versus East Coast. But there is a truth to New York that I love, and that's why I love New York.
Yeah.
I love it because you always know where you stand with people.
Uh-huh.
If they don't like you, they're going to tell you. They're like, Tony, I don't really like you.
Yeah.
But you know what? I like that you came here. I like that you showed up. Have some dinner. They're still
Yeah.
going to break bread with you.
Yeah.
They're still going to hang out with you. They just may not like you for this or that, but they don't do what we call the cancel culture.
Uh-huh.
They don't do that. They don't, just because you're not this or that, they don't dislike you as a person. They may not like you for certain things.
For
You get what
certain
I'm saying?
things, yeah.
Maybe the way this happened or that happened. And that, to me, is a piece of the puzzle that we can borrow as human nature or human
Mhm.
culture. Is to say, if we could just know how to tell the truth more with each other, then we'd be more clear with what our intentions are.
Yeah.
Or we'd be authentic. We'd be our authentic selves. But I think the trouble comes is, especially in our male culture, we're not really sure how to do that.
Mhm.
One, I think as male, that kind of touch on it, we don't know how to talk. And sometimes from a male perspective, a women perspective,
Mhm.
I think we're bridging that gap now. But if I was to give any kind of advice, I would say human character is the biggest value that you can
Uh-huh.
have as a person. And I'm working on that. I know
Yeah.
you're working on that. And one of the things we talk about actually is how much we appreciate how much of a human you are.
Yeah.
And vice versa. Like you told me the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's not coming because you want anything or want to gain anything
Yeah.
from me, and vice versa. Vice versa. I don't want to get anything from you. I'm telling you because when we see good people, we should recognize them more often.
Yeah.
And when we see good things happening, we should try to emulate those things more
Mhm.
often. So what I would say from my leave off point is, let's bring more good in this world. Like
No, I agree.
we
Yeah,
need
we need it.
we need it more than ever.
Mhm.
And to me, that's the real value. It's not about how much money you have, what you drive, what you wear, any of those things. It's your human character.
Uh-huh.
That to me is the greatest value a person can have. And if we do that more often, tell the truth more often, I think we're going to live in a better place.
I agree, man. Well,
Yeah.
hey, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah,
Appreciate you, man.
Yeah, how do people find you?
I've got my website, Ameet.Prasad at
I mean, not a vegetable.
rsir.com. Yeah, I always say like a meat, not a vegetable, right? If you look
Yeah.
at me, I eat more meats than vegetables. It's easy to remember, Ameet. My website's on there, Ameet.Prasad, or you can Google me. There it is. Yep. Or you can go to Facebook, and I'm always available.
Yeah.
You know, this is my livelihood, man. I do love what I do.
Mhm.
And there's a little saying that I guess I'll leave off one more is if you do what you love, the money will come, like my
Yeah.
dad would say. But if you truly do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life.
Yep.
And that's 100% true. And I feel like I've been really blessed to be in this business, to be around people that I care about. Most often I'm helping friends and family,
Mhm.
and that's people I love.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's great. So I hope for all of you guys out there, you'll find something that you love and you're passionate about. You can do it, and hopefully never work ever in your life.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you.
Thanks, man. It's been fun.
Thank you for tuning into the show. If you found value in what our guests shared and what we share on the show, please feel free to share with your friends and family. We'd love to see you back here. Thank you again. And you can find us on pretty much every social media channel, YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify as well. Thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. Step into the unscripted arena.